Justice, not her. Those three words, spit out by Donald Trump, cut through the chamber like a blade. But this was no ordinary hearing. It was a battlefield. More than 80 million Americans were watching. Over 40 cameras pointed at one woman. Jasmine Crockett, the so-called warrior for justice. Trump sneered, confident, untouchable. Crockett, unflinching, carried the weight of history. Every injustice, every silenced voice, every fight for equality. And in that moment, the world held its breath. Because what began as a hearing was about to erupt into the most brutal clash of truth and power America had seen in decades. The gavel struck once, twice, echoing like thunder in the chamber. Reporters' cameras clicked in rapid bursts, a storm of flashes washing over the room. Everyone was on edge. They could sense something more than a hearing was about to unfold. Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirk etched onto his face. He waited, savoring the silence, then let his voice drip across the chamber like venom. Justice, not her. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some chuckled nervously, others groaned in disbelief. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her eyes locked on Trump like sharpened steel. When she rose to her feet, her voice cracked through the chamber like a whip. You've mocked justice for years, Mr. Trump, but today justice speaks back. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in approval, others jeered, but no one dared look away. It was the opening punch in a verbal brawl the nation had tuned in to witness. Trump chuckled darkly, shaking his head. Spare me the theater, Jasmine. You're just noise, loud, reckless, weak. She cut him off, not even letting him finish. Weak is hiding behind lies. Weak is selling power to the highest bidder. Weak is being so terrified of the truth that you drown it in insults. The chamber roared. Every sentence landed like a strike, each syllable vibrating in the air. Even the chairperson's gavel seemed powerless to contain the energy surging through the hall. Trump's smirk faltered for half a second, just half, and before he doubled down. Lies? The only lie here is you pretending to represent the people. You don't fight for them, Jasmine. You fight for yourself, for headlines, for attention. He jabbed a finger toward her, his voice booming. You're nothing but a fraud waving a flag you don't deserve to carry. The insult was brutal, cutting, delivered with the raw confidence of a man who had built a career on domination. But Jasmine stepped forward, refusing to be diminished. Fraud? You've built your empire on fraud. Fraud of taxes, fraud of promises, fraud of the very oath you swore to this country. The words cracked like gunfire. For a brief instant, the audience sat stunned, torn between gasping and cheering. Jasmine's voice carried the weight of the millions who had felt betrayed, voiceless, invisible. And in that instant, she was not just Jasmine Crockett. She was every protester on the street, every silenced voter, every citizen demanding truth in the face of corruption. The air thickened with heat. Spectators leaned forward, eyes wide, afraid they'd miss a single blow. The tension was unbearable, as if the walls themselves might burst. Trump slammed his palm on the table. You think you scare me? You think this scares me? I've stared down the entire system and I'm still here. His voice was thunder. It shook the microphones, echoed in every corner of the chamber. But Jasmine refused to be drowned. She took a single step closer, calm yet unshakable. You're not here because you're strong. You're here because the truth has finally caught up to you. The crowd exploded. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed. The gavel pounded again and again. But there was no stopping it now. It was no longer a hearing. It was war. A war of words, of wills, of visions for what America would be. Trump sneered, his jaw clenched tight, and hissed into the microphone. I will bury you. And Jasmine, without missing a beat, fired back. Not today, not ever. The chamber gasped, a collective inhale that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the air. This was not just a clash of two politicians. This was a collision of eras, of ideologies, of raw human defiance. Every camera in the world was rolling. Every eye was fixed on them. Every second felt like history being written in blood and fire. The chairperson slammed the gavel again, shouting for order, but order was already lost. The storm had broken, and nothing could contain it now. And as the noise swelled, one thing became crystal clear. This was only the beginning. And if you want to witness every shocking twist, every revelation, every clash between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump, make sure you're subscribed to Harrison Stories, where truth meets storytelling. And with that promise lingering in the air, the hearing twisted into something darker. Trump leaned back, eyes glittering with malice, his tone no longer loud but sly, venomous. He raised a single hand, signaling, and the screens behind him flickered to life. "Let's hear from Jasmine Crockett herself," he purred. A reel of clips began to play. But they weren't full speeches. They were fragments, chopped and rearranged until they dripped with false meaning. In one, Jasmine's voice declared, "I don't care about justice." In another, "Law enforcement is my enemy." And the final splice, jagged and cruel, "America should burn." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Then came the eruption. Trump's supporters jumped to their feet, roaring in triumph. They clapped, they howled, they pointed fingers at Jasmine like she'd just confessed to treason. Trump basked in it, arms wide as though he had conjured the fury himself. "See," he shouted over the storm, her own words, "she despises you. She despises this country." The chant started, rhythmic, savage. "Liar! Liar! Liar!" The sound pounded against the walls like war drums. The chamber was no longer a place of law. It was a coliseum. And Trump, the showman, stood at its center, feeding the mob their spectacle. For a moment, Jasmine sat in silence. The weight was unbearable, the crowd baying for her collapse. The camera zoomed in, eager for a flicker of doubt, a crack in her armor. But no crack came. She rose, steady as stone, eyes locked on Trump. Her voice, when it broke through the noise, was razor sharp. "You think lies will save you? You think spliced clips can replace the truth? Mr. Trump, no one with a brain believes this circus." The crowd faltered, if only for a second. The chant stumbled, replaced by scattered gasps and murmurs. Trump chuckled, his laugh hollow and cruel. "Oh, Jasmine, they believe. They always believe me. That's why I win." He gestured to the crowd, riding their energy like a wave. "They know weakness when they see it. And right now, they smell it all over you." Jasmine slammed her palm against the table. The crack echoed like a gunshot. "Weak? Weak is hiding behind doctored videos. Weak is needing a mob to scream for you because you're too afraid to face me head on." The chamber exploded again, half in jeers, half in applause. Order disintegrated. The gavel struck and struck, but no one listened. Jasmine pressed forward, her words firing like bullets. "You want accusations, Mr. Trump? Fine. Let's talk about the university that conned working families. Let's talk about the charities you drained for your own luxuries. Let's talk about the women silenced, the workers unpaid, the lies stacked higher than your towers. You built your empire on scams, and now you dare to call me a fraud." The crowd convulsed. Some screamed for her blood. Others rose to their feet, clapping, tears of rage or hope in their eyes. Every corner of the chamber vibrated with chaos. Trump's smile faltered. His jaw tightened. He leaned toward the mic, his voice dropping into a growl. "Careful, Jasmine. You throw stones at me, you'd better be ready for the avalanche." The words dripped like ice. It wasn't debate anymore. It was threat, pure and naked. The crowd loved it. They pounded their fists on the benches, chanting his name, turning the chamber into a riot of sound. It was psychological warfare, the dirtiest of games. The mob became his weapon, their fury his shield. Every cheer gave him strength. Every chant pressed harder on Jasmine. But she refused to bend. She turned, meeting the mob with a steady gaze, then pivoted back to Trump. Her voice was calm, dangerous, unflinching. "You can scream, you can twist, you can unleash your mob. But truth doesn't need to shout, Mr. Trump. It only needs to stand. And I'm still standing." Silence, real silence. Even his supporters froze, stunned by her composure as if she had snatched the air from their lungs. The pause lasted only seconds, but it was enough to show that she wasn't broken. And then Trump shattered it. He slammed both fists on the table, his roar drowning the chamber. "This is my America. You don't get to redefine it." The mob erupted again, louder than before, a storm beyond control. The gavel pounded in vain. The hearing had dissolved into chaos, a battleground of lies and defiance. Trump versus Jasmine. Power versus truth. Manipulation versus resistance. The war was no longer about questions or answers. It was about survival. And Jasmine Crockett, though battered, was still on her feet. The battle had only just begun. She reached down, her fingers brushing over a thick folder marked with a crimson seal. For hours it had remained closed. Now with deliberate calm, she opened it. The crowd hushed, sensing a shift. Trump narrowed his eyes, his smirk tightening into something brittle. "Let me introduce Exhibit 1, Jasmine declared, her voice steady, carrying through the chamber like a bell. Direct evidence of corruption. Documents tracing millions of dollars siphoned from federal funds straight into businesses connected to Donald J. Trump." She held up the first sheet. Numbers, dates, signatures, all glowing under the chamber lights. Gasps rippled through the room like shockwaves. Trump laughed, a short, sharp sound. He leaned back, waving a dismissive hand. "Papers, just papers," he sneered. "Anyone can scribble numbers. You think this scares me?" But his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of tension, the faintest twitch at the corner of his jaw. Jasmine saw it, the cameras saw it, and the people saw it. She pressed on, striking where it hurt. "This isn't scribble. This is your signature. This is your empire feeding off taxpayer blood. You call yourself a patriot, but these documents show you robbed America blind." The chamber erupted. Half the crowd cheered with ferocious energy, while the other half screamed in rage, trying to drown her out. The gavel pounded desperately, the chair's voice cracking through the noise. "Order! Order in this chamber!" But there was no order left. The hearing had transformed into an arena, every word a weapon, every revelation a spark. Trump leaned forward, voice low, dripping with disdain. "You call yourself a warrior for justice, Jasmine? You're nothing but a performer with props. You bring papers, I bring power." His words slashed through the air like knives. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her gaze unblinking, her voice cutting deeper. "Power without truth is nothing. Power without justice is poison. And you, Mr. Trump, have poisoned this nation long enough." The duel had begun in earnest. Every sentence became a strike, every pause a feint, every retort a parry. Trump countered with mockery. "You think waving receipts makes you Joan of Arc? You're not a warrior, Jasmine. You're a clown, dancing for cameras." She answered without hesitation. "If I'm a clown, then you're the carnival, built on lies, flashing lights, and empty promises." The crowd howled. Cheers crashed against boos like thunder against waves. Some people stood on their chairs, fists pumping, screaming until their voices broke. Others shook their heads, red-faced, veins bulging with fury. The chairman's gavel struck again and again, but his commands drowned beneath the tidal roar. Trump slammed his fist onto the desk. "I built towers that touched the sky. I commanded nations with a phone call. And you think a stack of papers can bring me down?" Jasmine's reply came swift, slicing the room in half. "You built towers on stolen stone. You commanded nations with threats, not vision. And this stack of papers? It's the truth you fear." The silence that followed was razor thin, sharp enough to draw blood. Even Trump's supporters quieted, pulled into the deadly gravity of her words. He broke it with a snarl, his voice cracking under the strain. "Lies, all of it lies." Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "If it's lies, why does your signature stain every page? Why does every trail lead back to you? Why does your empire collapse without the veins of American taxpayers feeding it?" The evidence slammed into the room like hammers. Each question echoed, pounding against the marble walls, against the trembling hearts of the audience. The duel was no longer subtle. It was war. Every look between them was a blade drawn. Every word was a strike. Every breath was a countdown to the next blow. The chairman's voice cracked again, futile. "Order! I demand order!" But his gavel might as well have been a pebble against a hurricane. The chamber had become a forge, fire and steel clashing before the eyes of millions. Two figures locked in battle, one wielding lies and bravado, the other wielding evidence and unbreakable will. Jasmine stood tall, her papers raised like a shield and a sword all at once. Trump glared back, his laughter forced, his confidence trembling at its edges. The war of words had sharpened into a duel of survival. Neither would retreat, neither would bow. And as the crowd roared and split, as the gavel cracked helplessly into wood, one truth became clear. This was no longer just a hearing, it was a reckoning. Trump's smirk cracked, and what replaced it was darker. His face flushed, his jaw clenched tight. Gone was the showman's charm. What remained was raw aggression. He leaned across the desk, eyes blazing, his voice rising like a whip. "You think you can come after me, Jasmine? You think you can stand here, wave your little papers, and call yourself righteous? You're nothing. Nothing but a mouthpiece. You're a disgrace to this country. And if you keep pushing me—" His fist slammed onto the table with a boom that echoed through the chamber. "You'll regret it," the crowd gasped. Some erupted into cheers, hungry for blood. Others recoiled, unsettled by the naked threat spilling from the man who called himself leader. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Her eyes burned, her voice cut like glass. "Regret? The only regret here is yours, Mr. Trump. Regret that your lies don't land anymore. Regret that your mask is slipping in front of millions. Regret that people are finally seeing you for what you are, a bully masquerading as a victim." The words cracked through the air, sharp and undeniable. Trump stiffened. The mask of confidence wavered, replaced by something more desperate. He barked back, louder, harsher, spitting her name like venom. "Victim? I've built more than you'll ever dream of. I've fought harder than anyone in this chamber. I'm the one they came after. I'm the one they persecuted. I'm the one they tried to destroy. And I'm still standing." His chest heaved, sweat glistening at his temple. The crowd chanted again, some screaming his name, others shouting Jasmine's, the chamber collapsing into two furious armies. Jasmine's voice rose above them, unwavering. "You're not a survivor, Mr. Trump. You're a manipulator. You play the victim to mask your crimes. You wrap yourself in the flag while you bleed the country dry. You don't stand for justice. You stand for yourself." The chamber shook with shouts. The chairman's gavel struck again and again, but the sound drowned beneath the thunder of voices. The air was heavy, suffocating, thick with rage and revelation. Trump jabbed a finger across the table, his voice trembling with fury. "You dare lecture me on justice? You, a rookie congresswoman who'll be forgotten in a year? I am history, Jasmine. I am America." Jasmine stepped closer, her tone calm but laced with fire. "History will remember you, yes, as the man who pretended to be a martyr while silencing others, as the man who screamed about fairness while stealing in the dark, as the man who hid behind crowds and cameras but could never stand alone in the light." The crowd roared again, but this time the sound wasn't just rage. It was shock. It was disbelief. It was recognition. The mask was slipping, piece by piece. Trump's fury revealed the predator behind the performance. His words dripped venom, but they no longer carried the polish of control. He lunged verbally, his insults wild and jagged. "Pathetic! Fraud! Liar! You're nothing but a little girl playing warrior." Each word cracked through the air, but Jasmine's reply was colder, sharper, every syllable deliberate. "You call me names because you fear my words. You call me weak because you fear my strength. And you call me a liar because you cannot bear the truth staring back at you." The silence that followed was electric, dangerous. Even the crowd, fevered and divided, hesitated. They saw it. The cracks, the desperation, the man unraveling before their eyes. The chairman shouted again, pounding the gavel until his arm shook. "This chamber will come to order. This is not a circus." But it was a circus, one where the mask had fallen, where the so-called ringmaster revealed himself not as a lion, but as a cornered beast. Trump slammed his chair back, standing now, towering, his shadow stretched across the floor. He glared down at Jasmine, his teeth clenched. "You'll regret this, every word, every second." Jasmine didn't move. She lifted her folder again, holding it high for all to see, her voice unwavering. "I don't regret fighting for truth. I don't regret exposing lies. And I will never regret standing against men who mistake fear for respect." The words landed like hammers. The crowd roared, the cameras flashed, and the gavel rang uselessly against wood. The hearing had crossed the point of no return. This wasn't politics. This was survival. And as the storm raged inside the chamber, one thing became certain. The mask had fallen, and there was no putting it back on. If you want more stories where power collides with truth, make sure you're subscribed to Harrison Stories, where history is written in every clash. The chamber quivered with tension, every eye locked on the duel. And then Jasmine moved. Slowly, deliberately, she slid another folder across the table. Its cover was marked in red. Confidential. Gasps rippled through the room. Trump's eyes narrowed. Jasmine's voice rang out, steady and sharp. "These aren't rumors. These aren't whispers. These are classified records. Proof of financial dealings hidden from the public eye. Transactions routed through shadow networks, favors traded for silence, and trails that lead directly back to you, Mr. Trump." She opened the file. Pages rustled like the wings of a storm. Bank transfers, signed agreements, whispers of backroom promises turned into hard ink on paper. The chamber exploded with noise. Some shouted in disbelief, others in rage, and cameras clicked like gunfire. Trump's jaw tightened, but he forced a scoff, loud enough for the microphones. "Fake. All fake. Another witch hunt. You people will believe anything if it's stamped with a fancy red cover." He snatched a sheet, waving it in the air like a prop. This is garbage. Probably written last night by some intern desperate to impress. Or maybe by you, Jasmine. Wouldn't surprise me. You people will do anything to frame me." The crowd howled, torn between laughter and fury. The chairman's gavel thundered, useless against the storm. But Jasmine didn't back down. She leaned forward, her eyes cutting through the noise. "Forgery doesn't come with matching account numbers. It doesn't come with wire transfers linked to offshore accounts. And it doesn't come with signatures, your signature, on agreements buried in the dark. These documents speak louder than your insults." Trump laughed, too loudly, too quickly. His mask of confidence slipped again, but he fought to patch it with bravado. "Do you really think the American people will buy this? That they'll take your word over mine? You've seen the crowds. You've heard the chants. They know I'm innocent. They know I've been targeted. And I'll tell you who's really behind this." He leaned toward the microphones, lowering his voice to a growl. "It's the deep state, the same swamp I've been draining for years. They forged these papers. They planted these lies. And now they're using you as their puppet." The crowd erupted again, half rose to their feet, chanting his name, clapping wildly as if the conspiracy fed their fire. The other half jeered, furious, demanding order, demanding truth. Jasmine stood still, calm amid the chaos, letting his storm burn itself out. And when the roar began to dip, she struck again. "The deep state didn't sign these documents, Mr. Trump. You did. The deep state didn't profit from these deals. You did. And the deep state didn't come here today to scream and distract. You did." The words cracked like thunder. Even his supporters paused, their cheers caught in their throats. Trump barked back instantly, desperate. "Lies, all lies. They've done this before. They'll do it again. They blamed me for everything, for wars, for storms, for every problem this country ever had. And now this? Convenient timing, isn't it? Just when the truth about them was about to come out, suddenly I'm the villain again." His hands slashed the air, his words rapid, frenzied, circling conspiracy upon conspiracy. Every accusation he threw was a net designed to confuse, to entangle, to smother the weight of the evidence under waves of doubt. The room spun in chaos, truth clashing with lies, reason battling manipulation. People weren't just watching a hearing anymore. They were being pulled into a vortex, forced to choose sides in real time. The chairman's gavel pounded until the wood cracked, but the uproar only grew louder. The chamber was no longer a place of law. It was an arena, and yet beneath the storm, something subtle began to shift. For every shout that carried Trump's name, another voice echoed Jasmine's. For every jeer that called her a fraud, another whispered that the evidence was too precise, too damning to dismiss. The balance teetered, and for the first time it leaned, ever so slightly, toward Jasmine. She felt it, the tide turning. Not a wave yet, but the beginning of one. Her voice cut once more through the din, clear and unshaken. The truth isn't drowned by volume. It doesn't vanish under conspiracies. And no matter how loud you shout, Mr. Trump, these papers remain. This evidence stands, and justice will find you. The crowd's roar fractured. Some still screamed his name, but others listened. The spell of blind loyalty had cracked, and Jasmine, standing firm amid the chaos, had driven the first wedge into its heart. The chamber thundered, the storm raged, but one truth was now undeniable. The mask was gone, and the evidence was real. And for Donald Trump, the battlefield had never looked more dangerous. But he was not the kind of man to retreat. When cornered, he struck harder, and this time he went for blood. Trump leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping into a venomous drawl. "You want to talk about corruption, Jasmine? Maybe we should talk about you." The chamber went still. Every head turned. The pause was calculated, a predator savoring the silence before the kill. He smiled, sharp and cruel. "How about your messy little past? The debts you racked up in college, the rumors about your so-called associates, the nights you spent with donors who suddenly became very, very generous. Should we put those files on the table too?" Gasps cut the room like blades. The words were poison, deliberate, designed to smear and shame. Whispers spread like wildfire through the gallery, and cameras zoomed in, hungry for scandal. For the first time, Jasmine faltered. Her breath caught, her shoulders stiffened. Not because his words were true, but because they were venom disguised as fact. Lies crafted to wound deeper than evidence ever could. Trump saw the flicker. He pounced. "See? She doesn't deny it. She can't. And the American people know the type. Loud mouths hiding skeletons in their closets, pretending to be saints while living in sin. You want justice? Maybe you should clean your own house first." Laughter erupted from his supporters. They roared, clapped, whistled. Drunk on humiliation, desperate to see her broken. The chairman's gavel cracked again, powerless against the spectacle. For a heartbeat, Jasmine stood frozen in the storm. Trump's shadow loomed, thick and suffocating. The smear had worked, or so it seemed. Then Jasmine inhaled, deep, steady. And when she raised her head, her eyes blazed with fire. She stepped toward the microphone, her voice cutting like a blade through the chaos. "Mr. Trump, you've built your career on lies, on bullying, on turning personal pain into a circus for your amusement. But let me make something very clear." She slammed her hand on the desk. The crack silenced the room. "My debts? I paid them myself. My life? It's been transparent. Every mistake, every fight, every step of the way. I have nothing to hide because I built who I am without selling my soul." She leaned forward, her tone sharpened to a spear. "But you hide behind walls of money, stacks of lawyers, and a lifetime of dirty deals. You project your rot onto everyone else because you can't imagine a world where someone might actually stand honest. That's not my shame, Mr. Trump. That's yours." The chamber erupted, not with laughter, but with thunderous applause. The crowd that had jeered a moment ago now rose to its feet, clapping, shouting her name. Even those who had stayed silent felt the surge, the raw electricity of a fighter refusing to bend. Trump's smirk faltered. For the first time in the hearing, his insult had failed to land. The predator's teeth had struck steel. He barked over the noise, desperate. "Don't applaud her lies. She's putting on a show. But his words were drowned out. The sound of the chamber was no longer his to command. It belonged to Jasmine. She raised her hand and the noise softened, waiting for her voice again. Her tone dropped low, steady, resonant. You tried to shame me in front of this nation, but shame only sticks when there's truth behind it. And all you've done, Mr. Trump, is remind America exactly who you are. A man who attacks when cornered, who slanders when threatened, and who fears nothing more than a woman who won't back down. The crowd roared again, louder, fiercer. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was survival, spirit against shadow. The chairman's gavel rattled like a drumbeat, but it no longer mattered. The hearing had transformed into a battlefield where dignity and venom clashed with every breath. Trump's face hardened, pale beneath the orange glow of stage lights. He had struck brutally, viciously, and yet Jasmine still stood tall, still defiant, still unbroken. The duel was no longer about words. It had become something deeper, primal. A fight for dominance, a test of who could outlast the other in a war that felt like life and death. And as Jasmine turned back toward him, her presence towering over his spite, one thing became undeniable. The battle wasn't just surviving, it was escalating, and neither side had any intention of surrendering. Trump snapped first. His voice tore through the chamber like a siren, raw, furious, unhinged. Fraud, liar, criminal. She is the one who should be on trial, not me. He jabbed a finger at Jasmine, his face red, veins bulging. His words spilled in torrents. Wild, disjointed, impossible to follow. She forged the documents. She colluded with foreign agents. She's part of the deep state conspiracy. This whole hearing is a sham, a coup, a betrayal of America itself. Each accusation was louder than the last, piled recklessly one atop another, until the chamber shook with noise. Supporters erupted, pounding their fists on desks, stomping feet, chanting his name as if their volume alone could drown the evidence. The chairman's gavel hammered like a desperate heartbeat. Order! Order! But his voice was swallowed whole. Trump spread his arms wide, feeding the frenzy. You see? They fear me because I tell the truth. They fear me because I fight for you. Jasmine Crockett is nothing but a puppet, a fraud, Enough! Jasmine's voice sliced through the storm. Not shouted, not screamed, but sharp, deliberate, carrying more weight than his fury ever could. The room froze for half a second, caught by the clarity of it. She rose to her feet, her figure commanding in the chaos. Every syllable that followed landed like steel against stone. You call me a fraud. You call me a puppet. You bury this chamber in noise, hoping no one notices the truth bleeding at your feet. But volume isn't victory, Mr. Trump, and chaos isn't proof. Murmurs swept across the gallery. Her tone was calm, but each word struck like a knife, carving away at the armor of bluster he wrapped himself in. Trump's face twisted. He slammed the desk with his palm, roaring over her. You're a disgrace. You hate this country. You want to destroy it from the inside out. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her gaze locked on him. If exposing corruption is destruction, then yes, I will destroy it. If standing against your abuse of power makes me your enemy, then so be it. But I don't fear you, and I will not bow to the shadow you've cast over this nation. The chamber ignited. Trump's loyalists bellowed, waving signs, chanting, USA! USA! As if patriotism itself could be weaponized into a shield. On the other side, Jasmine's supporters surged to their feet, shouting her name, their voices fierce, relentless. Crockett! Crockett! The noise collided mid-air, a sonic war. The marble walls trembled. Reporters shouted into cameras, struggling to capture the madness unfolding in real time. The chairman, pale and sweating, slammed his gavel until splinters flew. This is out of order. This is... His words vanished under the avalanche of sound. The chamber was no longer a hall of justice. It was a coliseum. Trump fed the fire, his fists raised, his voice cracked but still thundering. They can't silence us. They can't silence me. This is the greatest witch hunt in history, and you, he spat the word at Jasmine, you will pay for this betrayal. Jasmine's reply was immediate, razor sharp. The only betrayal here is yours. To the truth, to the people, to the office you disgraced. History won't remember your noise. It will remember your lies. The chamber convulsed. Every line she delivered was a strike. Every retort a blade cutting deeper. Trump swung back with rage, but his blows landed clumsy, desperate, while hers carried precision. Each syllable aimed at the heart of power. The two forces collided not just in words, but in presence. One was fury without direction, the other conviction forged in fire. Together they created a storm so volatile, so consuming, that nothing else existed. Cameras caught every flash of anger, every tremor of defiance. The world was no longer just watching a hearing, it was watching history unravel in real time. And yet, in the center of the storm, one truth began to take shape. For all his shouting, Trump was flailing. For all his volume, his grip was slipping. Jasmine's words, steady and sharp, were cutting through, leaving marks that no chant could erase. The chamber thundered. The chaos peaked. The gavel lay broken on the desk. And still Jasmine stood tall, her presence unshaken, her voice unbroken. This was no longer a contest of politics, it was survival. And in the eye of the storm, Jasmine Crockett was proving herself not just a fighter, but a force. Yet even forces of nature can be cornered. The uproar had barely begun to settle when Trump shifted tactics again, his allies moving in like vultures. Each question hurled at Jasmine was loaded with venom. Each accusation layered with traps designed to twist her words. "Answer the question, yes or no," one congressman barked, his voice slicing through the din. Another leaned forward, smirking. "Isn't it true you've personally benefited from so-called donations linked to this case?" The air thickened with hostility. One after another they closed in, voices rising in unison. A coordinated strike meant to overwhelm, to isolate. Trump leaned back in his chair, his grin spreading wider with every volley. His laughter, low and mocking, seeped into the room like smoke. "Look at her, cornered, just another phony who thought she could take on a giant. You're done, Jasmine. Admit it. You're finished." The chamber roared with his supporters' cheers. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to tilt toward him, painting the scene as victory. Jasmine's jaw tightened. She stood firm, but the weight was crushing. Her answers, though sharp, were drowned beneath the barrage. Every time she cut one lie, two more rose in its place. The noose was tightening, the stage was tilting, and Trump basked in it, savoring every second. He spread his arms, soaking in the moment like a king before his court. "This is what happens when you challenge me," he bellowed. "They all fall. Every last one." The words hung heavy, poisonous. The room was tilting toward collapse. And then, a voice cut through. Calm, clear, unexpected. "Not this time." The chamber froze. Heads snapped toward the sound, and from the rear doors a figure stepped forward. The cameras whirred. The crowd gasped, and Trump's smile evaporated. The witness. A man once close to Trump's inner circle, his name whispered in scandals but never seen here. Now walking down the aisle with a stack of files under his arm, and a look of grim determination carved into his face. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before it detonated. The gallery erupted in shouts. Reporters scrambled, shouting names into their microphones. The chairman's gavel slammed, but this time not even he could mask the shock. Jasmine's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. Then resolve. She knew what this meant. The witness reached the front, his voice carrying over the chaos. "I have information, documents, proof that what Representative Crockett has presented is only the beginning." The chamber exploded. Shouts, screams, the sound of bodies half rising from their seats, some reaching for cameras, others for order. Trump shot up from his chair, his face drained of color, his voice cracking with fury. "This is a setup, a trap. He's a liar, a traitor. He doesn't belong in this chamber." But the damage was done. His control shattered the moment the witness spoke. The smug grin was gone, replaced with panic disguised as rage. Jasmine straightened, the weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in hours, the storm wasn't against her. It was shifting, turning, cracking open to reveal a sliver of light. She turned slowly to Trump, her voice steady, deliberate. "The thing about traps, Mr. Trump, is that they can snap shut on the one who sets them. The chamber roared again, louder, fiercer. Trump tried to shout over it, his words dissolving into incoherence, fists pounding the desk. But no one was listening. All eyes were on the witness now, on the documents he carried, on the sudden realization that the game had changed. Jasmine inhaled, steady and strong. She wasn't alone anymore, and the noose that had tightened around her neck had just snapped around his instead. The battlefield had shifted in a single heartbeat, the breathless moment when everything turned upside down, and the reckoning loomed closer than ever. The witness laid the stack of documents on the table with a finality that silenced even the loudest shouts. Pages heavy with dates, signatures, wire transfers, a paper trail carved in black and white. Jasmine's eyes locked with his, a silent pact formed in that instant. Together they were about to ignite the chamber. She reached for the first file, her voice sharp and unwavering. Exhibit A. Proof of concealed payments routed through shell accounts. These were not rumors. These are bank statements. Gasps cut through the room. Cameras zoomed in, shutters firing like machine guns. Screens lit up across the nation, magnifying every page she lifted. Trump shifted in his chair, tugging at his tie, the confident sneer cracking at the edges. Fake, all fake, he muttered, but the words lacked their usual bite. They came out hollow, brittle, collapsing under the weight of evidence. The witness leaned in, his tone grave. I was there. I saw the transactions authorized. I carried the instructions myself, and I kept copies because I knew this day would come. The chamber erupted. Journalists nearly fell over one another, scribbling, shouting into microphones. Supporters of Jasmine thundered with approval, while Trump's loyalists grew restless, their chants faltering, uncertain. For the first time, the imbalance of power tilted. Not just words, not just accusations, but hard evidence. Jasmine didn't pause. She turned page after page, each one another hammer striking the walls Trump had built around himself. Here are the contracts. Here are the communications. Here, direct signatures linking you, Mr. Trump, to the very deals you denied under oath. Trump slammed his palm against the desk, his voice rising in desperation. Lies, forged documents, a conspiracy cooked up by the radical left. But his pitch was off. The booming bravado was gone. It sounded shrill, defensive, stripped of its armor. The crowd sensed it. The shift was electric. Where once his words had bent the room, now they ricocheted back, hollow echoes of a man losing grip. The chairman struggled to restore order, his gavel cracking like thunder. Silence! Order! But the chamber was beyond his control. Jasmine raised her hand, commanding attention with sheer presence. Her voice dropped lower, colder, every syllable a blade. For years you've hidden behind bluster, threats, and noise. But noise cannot erase signatures. It cannot erase numbers. It cannot erase the truth. The words hit harder than the gavel ever could. The crowd roared, the press surged, and Trump flinched as if struck. His allies leaned toward him, whispering frantic strategies, but his eyes darted wildly, his composure unraveling thread by thread. The man who had once dominated every stage now looked small, cornered under the blinding glare of truth. The witness spoke again, voice steady, unshakable. If there is any doubt, I am prepared to testify under oath. Right here, right now. The declaration hit like an explosion. The gallery erupted, some cheering, some shouting in fury. The chairman froze, gavel midair, caught in the tidal wave. Trump staggered to his feet, his face red, sweat glistening under the lights. You won't get away with this. You're a traitor, a Judas. You think anyone believes you? But even as he screamed, his voice cracked. The power was gone. The room no longer bent to him. Cameras panned, catching every tremor, every flicker of fear etched across his features. For once, he was not dictating the narrative. He was drowning in it. Jasmine seized the moment. She stepped closer, her tone calm yet thunderous in its certainty. The truth doesn't need to shout. It stands on its own. And today, the truth has spoken. The room quaked. Some wept, some cheered, some cursed. But no one could deny it. Justice had flickered to life in the heart of chaos. The files lay open, the words carved into history. Trump's empire of denial crumbled in plain view, its cracks exposed for the world to see. And in that storm of flashbulbs and fury, Jasmine Crockett stood tall, not just a fighter, not just a force, but the vessel through which the truth finally cut through the noise. The chamber had witnessed the impossible. The unshakable had been shaken, and justice, fragile but blazing, pierced through the smoke. Then came the eruption. Trump slammed both fists against the oak table, the sound cracking through the chamber like a cannon shot. His face contorted, eyes wild, veins pulsing at his temples. "This is a witch hunt, the greatest witch hunt in the history of our nation," he roared, his voice breaking into a shriek. Papers scattered, the microphones rattled, the gavel froze midair. The man who once commanded arenas now looked less like a leader and more like a cornered animal, thrashing against the inevitable. He pounded the table again, desperate to summon the force he once wielded. "They want to silence me. They want to silence you. This is not about me. This is about every single one of you." The words rang hollow, but he hurled them like lifelines, clawing for sympathy. It was the oldest play in his book: turn defeat into martyrdom, transform weakness into the illusion of persecution. But the illusion cracked. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She rose slowly, her composure icy, her gaze locked on him with unshakable resolve. Each step forward drew the eyes of the chamber, pulling the oxygen out of Trump's performance. Her voice cut through his shouting, cool and merciless. "This isn't about silencing you. This is about accountability. And accountability is the one thing you've run from your entire life." The words landed like iron nails hammered into stone. The crowd hushed, hanging on every syllable. Trump spun toward her, jabbing a finger in accusation. "You're nothing, a nobody propped up to destroy me. You and your conspirators will pay for this." "Akum," but Jasmine only tilted her head, her tone sharper, deadlier. "The more you scream, the clearer it becomes. You're not a victim. You're not a martyr. You are simply exposed." Gasps rippled across the gallery. The word hung in the air. Undeniable. Irreversible. Trump's allies scrambled, shouting over her, trying to drown her voice. But it was too late. The cameras had caught his unraveling, the world watching his fury melt into desperation. Journalists surged forward, lenses zooming tight on his trembling hands, the sweat dripping down his brow. Networks plastered the moment across split screens, the once unshakable figure now collapsing under the relentless weight of truth. He tried again, his voice cracking. "I'm the one being hunted. I've done nothing wrong. I'm fighting for you, for America." But it no longer resonated. Even some of his supporters in the chamber faltered, their chants dimming into uncertain murmurs. Jasmine took another step closer, her presence commanding the stage he could no longer control. "No one is hunting you. The evidence speaks louder than your theatrics, and the whole world is hearing it right now." Trump's shoulders heaved, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. He looked around the room, searching for an ally, for applause, for someone to rescue him. But the eyes staring back were not filled with loyalty. They were filled with judgment. The silence that followed was worse than any roar of opposition. It was the silence of a man who had lost his grip on power and knew it. Jasmine broke that silence with a single devastating line. "History won't remember your excuses. It will remember your lies." The words echoed through the chamber, louder than his shouting had ever been. The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of reaction. Cheers, boos, screams, the sound of history colliding with the present. Trump sank back into his chair, muttering, fists clenched, the fury in his eyes dimming into something far darker. Fear. He looked less like a fighter and more like a man watching the walls collapse around him. The cameras drank in the image, beaming it across every living room, every phone screen, every corner of the globe. There was no escaping it. His downfall was no longer whispered speculation. It was a spectacle, and it was irreversible. The chamber felt it. The country felt it. The world felt it. Jasmine stood unmoved in the center of the storm, her presence an anchor in the chaos. Every word she had spoken, every document she had unveiled, every truth she had dragged into the light. It all converged here. And for Donald Trump, the man who had built an empire on bravado, manipulation, and spectacle, there was no curtain left to hide behind. The collapse was not coming. It was here. But Trump wasn't finished. Not yet. His eyes flared with a last, desperate fire. He pushed himself up from his chair, leaning over the table like a predator making its final lunge. His voice shook the chamber, a guttural roar edged with menace. If you do this to me, if you dare, you will tear this country apart. The system will fall. The people won't stand for it. Gasps rippled through the room. It wasn't defense anymore. It was a threat, not against Jasmine alone, but against democracy itself. He jabbed a finger toward the cameras, toward the millions watching. You think you can stop me? You can't. You'll destroy everything before you destroy me. The chamber tensed like a battlefield seconds before detonation. Supporters leapt to their feet, clapping, screaming, egging him on. Opponents jeered, their voices rising in fury. The walls seemed to vibrate with chaos. And in the middle of it stood Jasmine Crockett. She did not waver. She did not flinch. She rose from her seat, her figure tall, her gaze unshaken. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost too calm for the storm around her. And that calmness cut deeper than any shout. Mr. Trump, your threat is not to me. It is to the truth. It is to the very foundation of this nation. The room fell eerily still, the noise collapsing into a silence heavy with expectation. She stepped closer, her words deliberate, every syllable a blade. But here's the truth you cannot outrun. America is stronger than you. Democracy is greater than you. Justice will outlive you. The chamber froze. Even Trump's own allies blinked, their cheers caught in their throats. Jasmine's eyes blazed, her voice rising now, clear, unrelenting. You tried to bend this country to your will. You tried to twist the system into your shield. But tonight, in this chamber, in front of this nation, your reign of fear ends. She leaned forward, her words the final strike. Because justice is not afraid of you, and neither am I. The silence broke. For a split second, it was absolute, the stillness of history holding its breath. Then came the eruption. Applause thundered through the hall, rolling like a tidal wave. People leapt from their seats, hands slamming together, voices rising in unison. The sound rattled the walls, drowned the chaos, smothered Trump's fury beneath a flood of vindication. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled, history was written in real time. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a congresswoman. She was something larger, a symbol, a warrior who had stared power in the face and refused to bow. Trump's lips moved, but no sound came. His hands trembled on the desk. The image was devastating. A man who had once towered over the political world, now dwarfed by the silence of his defeat. The gavel struck. Once, twice, 3 times. But it barely mattered. The battle was already over. The world had seen. The world had heard. And the world would not forget. As the applause rolled on, Jasmine lowered her gaze for just a moment, her chest rising with the weight of what had just unfolded. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't celebrating. She was resolute, steady, the embodiment of the justice she had fought for. That night, her figure would replay endlessly across screens and headlines. Her words would be quoted, dissected, immortalized, and her final stand would define her legacy. The chamber had witnessed more than a clash. It had witnessed the birth of a new icon, the warrior of justice who refused to break. And Donald Trump, for all his bluster, had been reduced to a shadow. The crowd's roar swelled once more, as if sealing the verdict. A verdict not spoken by any judge, but delivered by the people, the cameras, the moment itself. This was no longer politics. This was history, and Jasmine Crockett had carved her name into it with words sharper than steel. The gavel fell a final time, but the sound was swallowed by the silence. Not applause, not shouting. Silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the chamber itself was holding its breath, unwilling to break the spell of what had just been witnessed. Then slowly, the spell fractured. Donald Trump pushed back his chair. The scrape against the marble floor was jagged, awkward, nothing like the grand exits he once commanded. His shoulders sagged, his face pale, his lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. There were no cheers for him now, no chance, no thunder of loyalty to lift him from the wreckage. Only cameras, unblinking, catching every falter in his step. Only the gaze of history watching as the empire of bravado collapsed into the quiet ruin of disgrace. He walked toward the doors, each stride slower than the last. For a man who had once filled stadiums with frenzy, this retreat was a humiliation far greater than any defeat at the ballot box. He did not look back. He could not. And as those heavy doors closed behind him, it was as if an era shut with them. An era of fear, of spectacle, of unchecked arrogance. The chamber exhaled. All eyes turned almost instinctively to Jasmine Crockett. She did not bask in it. She did not raise her hands in triumph. She stood still, steady, her presence commanding without demand. Her figure in that moment was not just that of a congresswoman who had won an argument. It was something larger, something elemental. She had become the embodiment of defiance, of truth refusing to kneel, of justice refusing to be silenced. When she finally stepped forward, the crowd erupted. Applause roared through the chamber, rolling in waves, crashing against the marble walls. People rose to their feet, shouting her name, chanting, clapping until their hands turned raw. But Jasmine walked with quiet purpose. No theatrics, no arrogance. Her silence was louder than any roar, her calm dignity eclipsing the storm that had consumed the night. The cameras followed her every step, immortalizing the moment. The warrior of justice leaving the battlefield not with fanfare, but with a steady grace that spoke louder than fire. Outside, the world trembled. Screens lit up across continents, news alerts flashing in bold letters. Trump shattered. Crockett stands unbroken. Crowds gathered in city squares, in bars and living rooms, their faces lit by the glow of history. Some wept, some cheered, some sat stunned in disbelief. But all of them felt it. Something had shifted, something irreversible. The empire of fear had cracked, and in its place a symbol had risen. Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a name on a roster, no longer just a politician with a microphone. She was a symbol carved in fire, proof that truth, though fragile, could endure the fiercest storm. The night belonged to her, and yet she carried it with humility, her expression not one of gloating, but of solemn recognition. Because she knew the battle was bigger than herself. Because she knew that every word spoken tonight would echo into tomorrow, into history, into the conscience of a nation. As the cameras lingered on her face, the applause still rolling like thunder, a chill swept through the air. It wasn't fear, it wasn't triumph. It was the recognition of witnessing something that would be remembered for generations. The story would be retold in classrooms, in headlines, in whispers over dinner tables. The night when a tyrant's threats crumbled into dust. The night when a woman stood unbroken, and the world saw justice not as an ideal, but as a force made flesh. When Jasmine finally stepped into the cool night air, the flashes of cameras nearly blinded her. But she did not shield her eyes. She walked into the storm of light, unflinching, unstoppable. Behind her, the doors of the chamber remained shut. And behind those doors lay the ruins of a man who had once believed himself untouchable. Ahead of her stretched something far greater, a future no longer defined by fear, but by the relentless pursuit of justice. The night ended not with fireworks, not with spectacle. It ended with the image of Jasmine Crockett walking forward, her silhouette cutting through the chaos like a blade through smoke. And the world knew in that breathless silence that a symbol had been born. Not just a congresswoman, not just a fighter, but a warrior of justice, immortal. In the end, the clash was never just about one woman and one man, or even about power and downfall. It was about the truth that justice, though fragile, can burn brighter than fear when someone dares to stand for it. Jasmine's fight reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to rise above it, proving that in every storm, there is room for light if we choose to be the flame. If this journey shook you, pause here, breathe it in, pass it on, tell it, share it, remind someone that justice is never silent. Follow Harrison's stories, where every storm meets its voice. Turn on the bell, because the next reckoning won't whisper. It will roar, and it may just change how you measure courage. This tale is a fictional dramatization, born from echoes of real struggles and real bravery. Any likeness to actual figures is symbolic, crafted for reflection, for awakening. Thank you for watching. Justice does not arrive as a gift, it rises, because we demand it. This is Harrison Stories.